So then you look at the CDC recommendations. So who are the people that are increased risk? Anybody know? Who are the people that the recommendations are for first? Right, so pregnancy, so pregnant women, hopefully there aren't pregnant men. So pregnant women and children. And then people who might have other reasons why they would have breathing problems or close contacts with people who have the flu. So generally healthcare workers should probably do it. And the children idea is different than usually. Usually we say that with the seasonal flu, and that's why we saw so many people raise their hand, is that mature people, you guys like that? Mature people should take the seasonal flu vaccine, and maybe even for bacteria, for pneumonia, they should take the pneumococcal vaccine. Anybody here take the pneumococcal? Right, so some people take it, some people don't. There's a question if somebody with MS wants to expose themselves to so many vaccines. So the way I look at it is if a person comes in and they are very nervous about the idea of a vaccine for the H1N1 and they're not within those recommendations and we don't have enough, well then I say, well, you're so nervous and it's kind of up in the air of whether you should or not. If they have other risk factors that might make us want to do it, we think about it. And so both of those things together can be very useful in terms of knowing someone's risk versus their benefit. Now there are some doctors who think that people with MS, because there's hyperimmunity, meaning that your body is not immunosuppressed. So when you see all those commercials for boosting your immune system, if you have MS, you probably don't want to boost it. You probably don't want to attack yourself more. And so some people think that that's not just selective immunity, that people with MS might be at a lower risk for having the flu, and so might not need the vaccine. And some people with MS, if you've noticed that, they have less colds or less flus than before they got diagnosed. And I see some people nodding their heads, and I'm sure that just like there's people nodding their heads, there's people who are thinking no at the same time, and that's because everybody is individual. So the recommendations are not the same as those old guidelines where I say there's no data back and forth. Even without data, you have to look at yourself and say, well, if you haven't ever had the flu vaccine, have you ever had the flu? And if you don't think you have, that might mean that you're a lower risk, either because of the MS itself or maybe because your body itself, has protected itself from having the flu. With that said, some doctors are saying, well, there's a pandemic. So it's not just an epidemic, it's throughout, so it's pan. And so people really should protect themselves. I'm hoping for herd immunity, meaning that if the other people are immune, it won't get passed. But most of the people that we're seeing that are passing away, unfortunately, are children. And unfortunately, it's children who have some sort of neurological problem. The problem is I don't know what that means, because they write, for instance, a child had epilepsy. Do you just mean that they have seizures every so often? Or do you mean somebody that's developmentally delayed with epilepsy and might have more infections anyway? So it's not clear because the CDC is not giving us all of that information. Does that help? So let's look. The second one we talked about, and we're going to talk about, is how do you know what type of MS you have, and how do you know if you have relapsing remitting MS that you have secondary progressive? So let's start out. How many people here have never had a relapse and have what they term primary progressive MS? Some people call it chronic progressive. Okay? So we see about right. We see 15% of people with MS don't start out with discrete relapses. And I find sometimes I find that the two communities don't understand each other. Because the person with primary progressive MS says, what do you mean MS gets better? MS never gets better for me. And then you have the relapsing remitting, especially the early people, maybe people with clinically isolated syndrome, so singular sclerosis or just one attack, they're scared that they're going to turn into this idea of primary progressive, even though it's different than what they have. So I actually think the group that can do the best of bringing everyone together is the secondary progressive MS group. Because it's kind of that bond, understanding the relapsing remitting community and also understanding what the primary progressive community is going through. So with that said, about half of people with relapsing remitting MS don't stay with relapsing remitting MS, but at a certain point start to have progression. Now what progression means is that even in between relapses are called exacerbations, flares, or attacks, not exasperations, but exacerbations. So if somebody stops having those, or still has them, but even in between them, starts to have some progression, where your walking gets worse and worse. When you had a relapse, yeah, your walking got really bad and maybe it got better, or mostly better, but then even in between the relapses, it gets worse. So if you're noticing that progression, even in between relapses, or you're not having relapses anymore, that's a sign that you may have secondary progressive MS. Now, a lot of times, if you have a relapse, you don't necessarily get fully better. And because of that, I wrote a trial that we're starting, and it's the only place there is in North Florida. We will come to other places, or people can come to us. To come to the villages is, I've learned, very far, and I would have to bring a whole team. So we would have to come for multiple patients at the same time, which probably wouldn't happen because the study is called RECLAIM, and the idea is that if somebody has a relapse, and then 2 weeks later they aren't fully better, even though they're not supposed to necessarily be fully better, usually people think that with steroids they're going to get better straight away. And also their doctors think that. So their doctors may give them another 3 days of IV Solumedrol, IV methylprednisolone, or oral, or whatever they're using, and they might give IVIG, they might give plasmapheresis, they might give nothing. So in this trial, you have your regular 3 days of IV Solumedrol, and then if at 2 weeks you aren't fully better, then we're going to randomize you to receive 2 types of medicine. So there's no chance you're getting placebo or nothing. So one arm is going to get IV Solumedrol for another 3 days, and then one arm is going to get intramuscular, once again a needle, ACTH. Anybody here ever had ACTH? Right, so before Solumedrol came out by a small company in 1989 called Parke-Davis, that was bought by another small company called Pfizer, then that became the standard. And the question is, ACTH is not a corticosteroid, so it is different than Solumedrol. So somebody who doesn't fully respond to Solumedrol, our question is, if you gave them more, are they going to respond to the Solumedrol or respond to the ACTH, or will it be equal? And so that study is called RECLAIM. It's on the clinicaltrials.gov website, where you can find a lot of trials that are going on. You can also come to our website, www.neurologique.org, so NEUROLOGIQUE.org, so not .com, but .org. You can also go to www.drdanielkantor, DRDANIELKANTOR.com, and all that does is jump there to that other website. So you actually can go there and you go under research and you can click off, do you have MS, what type of MS, where you live, and you can actually get a list of the trials that are going on in your general area. What I understand is a lot of people here either go to Ocala, so a lot of people see the excellent doctor, Dr. Gaudier, or some patients go to Orlando, and I think some patients see Dr. Honeycutt, another excellent neurologist. So this trial, if you're interested, give us a call, give us an email. Our phone number is 904-834-3007, and all that information or our business cards will be available afterwards. So basic. Sorry.
How long is the trial?
So the trial basically is that 2 weeks later you get it, and then you're enrolled after getting the medicine, and it's just another 12 weeks. We just measure you at different time points to see how you're doing, and that's going to answer the question, hopefully. So